Today we've decided to offer a few biographical details on our beloved Zelda that may go against the grain of what people read in the many biographies of Scott Fitzgerald, as well as Zelda's biographers. What often happens with published books is that a mistake is made in a very early one and then becomes repeated by other writers who use the original published source as a sort of golden rule. It's a kind of literary version of the child's game of telephone. The main problem starts with Nancy Milford's best-selling book, Zelda. Now, Milford undoubtedly put Zelda on the map because she was a very gifted writer and had a story to tell that 1972 was a perfect fit for second-wave feminism. It was the era of Sylvia Plath and Zelda Sayre Fitzgerald as the ultimate victims of evil husbands. That the fact of Zelda's life didn't always fit the exact pattern of victim have been ignored for decades. Indeed, when Mitford passed away recently, all the usual mistakes about Zelda's 48 years of life as wife, mother, and artist were repeated in Milford's New York Times obituary. The most damaging mistake in Milford's book, I think Kendra would agree with this, Alaina would agree with this, is that Zelda's first doctor, Oscar Farrell, diagnosed her as a schizophrenic. At this point in the book Zelda, the entire tome becomes about Zelda's schizophrenia. Now, to be frank, both psychiatrists, Oscar Farrell and his mentor, Eugene Bleuler, were responsible for diagnosing as schizophrenic seeming the entire overworked corps de ballet of the Ballet Russe, including Nijinsky, Zelda, and later the modern dancer Lucia Joyce, who of course was James Joyce's daughter. I have a feeling that anybody who walked into Dr. Farrell's office, boom, schizophrenic. I can't prove it, but that's just my inclination. But here's the thing. In Milford's notes, hidden in the back of the book, she reports of an interview with Dr. Farrell in the 1960s, where he puts aside, in quotes, the original diagnosis of Zelda's schizophrenia and surmises that she simply had symptoms and behaviors that could be associated with the illness, or maybe not. So there you have it. She's labeled and mailed off to the world as an incurable nutcase. A talented nutcase, but a nutcase nevertheless. But here at the Fitz, we want to set things right. And since our time today is limited, I'd like to focus on Zelda's return to Montgomery in 1940. She arrives in November from Highland Hospital in Asheville, North Carolina, to live with her mother, Minnie, who lives next door to Zelda's sister, Marjorie. So she's back in the bosom of her family after years of freedom from family responsibilities, and with the somewhat lax discipline of Highland Hospital, she was free in that time to pursue her writing and painting. In other words, she's grown accustomed to Virginia Woolf's concept of a room of our own, of one's own. That a woman must have money and privacy to write fiction, or in Zelda's case, fiction as well as painting. Now, it must be said in Scott Fitzgerald's enormous favor, he was the one who gave the money to support his wife's work, while he was forced to write short stories rather than novels he preferred. So, while she loved her family in Montgomery, when it got a bit claustrophobic, she would return to Highland Hospital or Asheville, North Carolina in general, and stayed at boarding houses and hotels so that she could pursue her interests without interference of family and friends. So by 1940, let's remember, Zelda is no longer the high school beauty or the jazz-age princess. In fact, she's a sober-minded intellectual whose extensive interests range from paintings and theories of paintings to choreography, fiction, dance lessons, the study of the Bible and attending the churches of St. John's Episcopal and the Church of the Holy Comforter to quietly meditate on her relationship to God. That relationship was often used in her artwork. In fact, we have, I don't know if it's open, but we do have one of her religious artworks in the back room.
We have a couple I will bring out.
Yeah. She created many Bible paintings for her family. Now, this religiosity is used against her by her biographies. But I would ask, did Milford not realize that growing up in the South often goes hand in hand with religiosity? I don't know if you would agree with that because I'm a Northerner, but it seems to me that it does go hand in hand. Anyway, surely Milford must have known that, but she chose to ignore it. I also think that too many biographers focus on her 5-mile walks around Montgomery that had been recommended by Dr. Carroll of Highland Hospital. Remember, it was easier to walk throughout Montgomery in her day. It was a much smaller city because there was no interstate that would divide downtown from the rest of the town. The walking was considered eccentric, as was her bicycling. Perhaps she was, as usual, ahead of her time in understanding the health benefits of those activities. And as someone who has moved here only 7 years ago, why wouldn't you want to walk around Montgomery? Did Milford and others not realize how gorgeous some of the neighborhoods of Montgomery are? How could someone like Zelda, with such an acute eye for beauty and love of exercise, not want to walk under the oak and magnolia and pecan trees of Cottage Hill and Cloverdale and Capitol Heights? Also, Zelda, like most women, worried about her weight. And as you can see from photographs taken in the 1940s, she finally achieved the silkiness, to use her own word, that she had so hoped to achieve. I will say that whatever Highland Hospital's Dr. Carroll's faults, and they were manifest, maybe we can get into that later, he was right about healthful food and exercise for a quiet mind and a strong body. So why should Zelda not take his advice in that regard? As an aside, this is just a little aside here, Zelda gained a lot of weight when she was pregnant at 20 and had a tough time losing it after she gave birth. She never got over an acquaintance of her friend, Marie Hersey, whispering at a party, "Who's your fat friend?" She recounted this hurtful remark several times during her life and even committed it to an article she wrote. So weight was an issue with her like it is with how many other women. Then we get to her style of dress. Her sister, Rosalind Sayre, once said that Zelda did not have any style when it came to her clothes. Her photographs, aside from the famous Elizabeth Arden photo, which you can see here, show her with a tousled bob and sporty clothes. She was very athletic and seemed to wear clothes that allowed a lot of movement, not necessarily to flatter her figure or to make her look glamorous. That attitude struck a dim note with her male autobiographers. Matthew Brookley writes, "The most famous Montgomery belle returned home to live as an impoverished invalid. Old friends were kind to her, with a kindness reserved especially in the South for the broken and the helpless." Andrew Turnbull, who should have known better, writes, "She walked the streets in a long black dress and a floppy black hat, with an open Bible before her and her lips moving. I don't know how she walks and read the Bible, but yeah. James R. Mello, in his book Invented Lives, writes, her life was rather like the marquee on a theater closed down. The main attraction, still announced in jumbled letters, a thing of the past. In addition to this comparison of a brilliant woman to an old flea pit theater, he also has her walking around town in those long dresses. The problem with all of these descriptions is the photographic evidence. There are photos of Zelda from 1940 to 1948, and not once do we see her wear these types of widow weeds. Several photos taken by her daughter in Montgomery show her wearing a casual blouse and a light skirt with pretty slippers. Her clothes are typically lightweight, summery, clean, and pressed. In the same time frame, we see her in New York City, holding her first grandchild, dressed in a light blouse and skirt with a winter coat thrown over it. Again, it is perfectly normal. In fact, her hair is styled with long, loose curls. And yes, she does look older. She's older. But in my opinion, she's really quite pretty in these photographs, something no biographer will ever mention about Zelda in the 40s. In the late Sean Sudia Skihan's fabulous new book, An Appreciation of Splendor, which I recommend to everybody, features an unpublished photo of Zelda at a party given for GIs during World War II. And she's wearing a flowered blouse or dress. We can only see her from the waist up. I ask, where are these black clothes?
And that photo is in our catalog.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Completely forgotten in the 40s is her work for the Red Cross as a volunteer during, the Second World War. No, according to a biographer, she wasn't fired because she wasn't able to fold bandages. In fact, she was training in first aid. She was how you get fired as a volunteer for the Red Cross, but that was what one writer said or wrote. She was a member of the Press and Authors Club for Professional Writings that has been going for over a century now, and meets at the Fitzgerald Museum once a month to this very day. She lectured at Huntington College, reviewed books for Armed Forces Radio, was an active member of Penn Women. She had 3 or 4 exhibitions at the Museum of Fine Arts here in town, displaying her large flower watercolors and her amazing paper dolls in figures from fairy tales, Alice in Wonderland, French historical figures that showed not only her artistic gift, but her extensive knowledge of classic literature and French history. No wonder.
Are the paper dolls available?
Yes, they're in book form now. You can see them all.
Yeah.
We may have a copy
I
here.
think we're out, but Eleanor Lanahan, Zelda's granddaughter, did the book. It came out.
Well, I say here, just hang on one second. Her granddaughter, a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago, published a book of the paper dolls. The New York Times art reviewer called Zelda a genius. So I sadly ask, and this is my own opinion, this has nothing to do with the Fitzgerald Museum. I ask, when will the citizens, the current curators of the Museum of Fine Arts, and the government of Montgomery, Alabama recognize that and honor her more completely? She's, in my opinion, she's been erased. While she was down here, she also worked on her final novel, Caesar's Things. Most people who have read it at Princeton University, it has never been published, dismiss it because it has hallucinatory aspects which have been attributed to her madness. It is as autobiographical as her first novel, Save Me the Waltz, but is a different tone and in its own way is extremely well written. It is even more poignantly regretful than Save Me the Waltz, but perhaps its truth-telling on aspects of her life and the people she knew in Montgomery and in Europe was a little too close for comfort. Anyway, I do call for its publication. I have wanted it to be published ever since I first read Milford's book, Zelda, in which portions of it are published. Her one published novel, Save Me the Waltz, which is now never out of print, never, for 50 years, is a beautiful achievement and should be read more widely, particularly by women. Her description of Montgomery and her family made her sisters weep with nostalgia. Her incredible scenes of dancing with the ballet russe are some of the finest writing ever done on the tortures of becoming a professional dancer. Even her most harshest critics, which unfortunately sometimes included her husband, acknowledge that she was the master of metaphor. I'd like to end this with a brief paragraph from Save Me the Waltz that not only shows her use of metaphor, but her literary genius in general. Here she is describing the flowers that she brought to her beloved ballet instructor. Quote, "Yellow roses she bought with her money, like empire satin brocade, and white lilacs and pink tulips like molded confectioner's frosting, and deep red roses like a Villon poem, black and velvety as an insect wing, cold blue hydrangeas, clean as a newly calcimated wall, the crystalline drops of lily of the valley, a bowl of nasturtiums like beaten brass. She bought lemon yellow carnations, perfumed with the taste of hard candy, and every kind of white flower the florist knew how to grow." Well, it goes on in this vein, and it's one of my personal favorite paragraphs in literature. Perhaps one day, I hope one day, we can give her the attention that we give to other female authors of her generation, such as Radcliffe Hall, Juna Barnes, and Anais Nin.
This is a watercolor. It's at the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts, and it's known as Deposition. She, in the letter, this one is Love One Another, and she did the Beatitudes for her grandchildren. And in a letter to John Biggs was Scott's classmate, who's the executor of her will, of his will. She said she's doing a satirical set of paintings, Beatitudes, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And so, no. But, so my background is, like I said, history and art history, and I've been doing a lot of research, and I think I've discovered the reason for Zelda's upturned chin and this arm is because she, apart from life drawing at the sketch club, before they didn't have Google, they didn't have Google Images. Where do you see pictures? Is what books you physically own. And Scott gave Zelda a collection of prints the year before his death, and in it there's quite a number. It's like the history of art history. It's a really beautiful book, but there's all these Renaissance paintings, a lot of artists that aren't well known today, and I think what she's doing is she's teaching herself life drawing based on this how to draw book, but using the Renaissance paintings as her guide. So when they say she was heavily influenced by Picasso, blah, blah, I don't think so. I think her figure drawing, I can show you the originals, and it has this upturned chin and the foreshortened arm, comes straight out of Michelangelo, Leonardo, and some of the Renaissance painters from this book. So
I agree.
Yeah. But she was talking about, I think her religious nature was misunderstood.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
most definitely.
And when I was
And I
talking,
think
go
it
ahead.
does come from, these exceedingly well-educated biographers who probably did not have a strong religious background themselves. Certainly we know Scotty did not. So I'm not surprised that they would view her religiosity as some sort of mania.
Mm-hmm. And also, and I say this as a Southerner who's lived in Japan, the UK, and Australia, unless you're Southern, then you don't understand the South. You know, you never go, oh, I'm gonna write about Japan and never been there. This is the image that Maire is talking about of Zelda and her blouse.
Oh,
You see?
Yeah.
There's a gentleman who lives in the neighborhood not far from here, and his mother was friends with Zelda, and he said that she dressed very European, and she'd wear berets, she rode a bicycle, and that her dress was a little more what we would consider eccentric, but it's not, as you can see, it's and you see, and also, can I say one other thing? She has this really, she has a really lovely bob, and you know, when they always have those society clippings in the newspapers, they mention her that week as how she has this great new haircut. So that's how we were kind of able to date this photo. But this is also at Maxwell. She's doing a lot with the war effort in Maxwell, you know, during,
In what capacity? I mean, really the war efforts in what capacity?
In the war, she helped with, she did book reviews for Armed Forces Radio. We know that when the author Baravici came, she drove him to address the troops, the Tuskegee Airmen in Tuskegee. She also helped with like from World War I when they did the bandage rolling, they did something very similar in World War II. And she also both in 1 and 2 helped with the bonds, the drives, the fundraising drives.
Well, I personally do not know much about Zelda, but I mean, from what I'm reading, she has gone through some treatment for she has gone through treatment for schizophrenia. No.
I think you missed the beginning there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. She can catch you up.
Okay.
She was misdiagnosed in Switzerland, and her lead biographer, Nancy Milford, put it in her book and then buries it in the footnotes that the doctor, quote, walked back the diagnosis. But we have her records from Switzerland, and he never diagnosed her. Bleuler, the man who coins the term schizophrenia, met Zelda, I'm sorry if I remember.
No, please.
But met Zelda for about 90 minutes, after which he declared her schizophrenic, and she declared him an imbecile.
That's great.
But one second.
I love her.
But the problem is that I think it's very complicated because she clearly was acting unusual. I'm doing research on it for a different book because she does start acting strange, but we think that she had a form of toxicity. Ballet is very painful. Imagine if you took a Tylenol PM, a little stronger. It was a pain reliever with a sedative in it. We know she was taking it. We know if you take too much but are dehydrated, don't have enough salt in your system, it can cause you to have auditory and visual hallucinations. And we know in Switzerland they removed all salt from her diet. And the telltale sign is that painful eczema rash.
Yeah.
So they treated her eczema rash with it and took the salt out. So we believe that her quote unquote symptoms were inadvertently induced medically. You know, they were causing it. We have the records, we know they gave her. But then later, she was given insulin shock therapy, which people, and this is where as a Zelda fan scholar, I think Fitzgerald gets a bad rap. The tragedy of the situation, I think, and the lady I'm co-writing with, is had they been in the US, they knew about it. It was literally in the newspaper here to beware of it and to take salt. But they were in Europe. And then he got her the best treatment he could afford, almost to a fault. And the best treatment in the world, primarily for men, was insulin shock therapy. Nijinsky had it. John Nash at Princeton had it, and what it is, it's an insulin-induced coma, like a hypoglycemic coma, which is medical malpractice today. And they've lost their records in Asheville, but I think it's Klein talked to one of the final doctors, and he estimated she probably had 70 to 90 treatments. So we think she most likely had what we would say today early onset dementia because of brain damage. So that's it, and yeah, that's our working hypothesis at the moment.
I think though that's, I'm sorry, I think that some of her early symptoms also came from exhaustion. I mean, people just don't know how Sergei Diaghilev worked his dancers almost to death. I mean, it really was.
Yeah.
The great ballerina of New York City, Gelsey Kirkland, wrote a book called Dancing Upon My Grave. And it was about Balanchine, who was a direct descendant, not literally familiarly, but had been trained by Diaghilev's, how to work dancers to death. I mean, they were forced to diet. Diaghilev wanted the women to be like this, and Zelda, of course, followed this. Although she was not a member of the corps de ballet, she was working every single day with all professional dancers, and she followed them. And I think it had the beginnings of what would.
So for a little perspective, we all know, you've all heard of Gatorade. Why was Gatorade invented? University of Florida? Because they didn't give football players water during games. Gatorade was created to keep you from getting dehydrated, and that was in the 1960s.
Yeah.
Wow. So if you think, well, they really didn't understand how horrific, how bad dehydration was. So that's the thing is, I think you were asking, did she just have bipolar? That's what I thought.
Yeah.
But when you sit there and you go through all the medical literature from then and today, as recently as July of 2022, because of COVID, people were overtaking medicine. And there was this spike in schizophrenia diagnosis across North America, US and Canada together. And there was a special bulletin sent to all emergency rooms in North America saying, if you think they have schizophrenia, give them saline and wait 6 to 8 hours, because they were overtaking certain vitamins, and that compound is a filler.
Yeah.
And so people who were overworking, dehydrated, were having these, what they thought schizophrenic episodes, and they just gave saline for 6 to 8 hours and they were fine. And that's the heartbreak, I think, of Zelda. I know it sounds weird, but it would almost been better if she did have schizophrenia. Can you imagine not, and then that journey? But I think to her credit, and I know we have the suits. I'll move the suits in the pink room so you can go in there. The images in the pink room are of the paper dolls and the ballet. She did them for her grandchildren. I think context for the art is very important. If you're doing stuff for your grandchildren, it's whimsical versus a fine art painting. But you can see her ballet stuff. And then in the green room, that's where we have most of ours. But you imagine the stigma. One other thing, the reason I think she and Scott were on the verge of divorce, we also forget how devastating and scandalous a divorce would have been in the 30s.
Yes.
You couldn't afford it. I don't know. I think he may not have gotten work had they divorced. So the reason we know is that there is this transcript, only small portions. I think Milford has the greatest amount of portions of that in her book. And she, to her credit, doesn't interpret them. And then other people quote from them, and it becomes, like she was saying, this terrible thing. But in it, they strike this bargain. And the reason I think she goes to Asheville is her family summered there their entire lives. When we went to Zelda Days, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
We went to this little town, Saluda. That's the second oldest. It's one of the oldest general stores in America. And we walked in and they're like, why are you here? And we're like, oh, Zelda Days. And they said, we asked if they knew anything. And they go, oh yeah, 5 generations of Sayers summered here.
Yeah.
Oh, never heard it. I mean, we've never heard it. I'm like,
Beautiful
wow.
town. I
So
recommend it.
my hypothesis on Zelda is that she and Scott effectively separate. He goes to Hollywood in 36 and she goes to Highland because it's a cover. They're divorced. So she kind of took that stigma. But if you've been there, it is beautiful. And you're not in an asylum if you're walking from Highland Hospital to Grove Park Inn for lunch and back.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And how do we know? Because like they had to pay the lunch bill. So I think she's painting there, she's choreographing there. If you see her schedule, breakfast in bed, massage, hydrotherapy, which we call hot tub today.
Wow.
She's walking, like he was really into the walking. And so
Did she go to Black Mountain College ever, do you think?
I don't know.
That was.
Yeah. And so while she's at Highland Hospital, I think it's in 37, that Highland arranges for her to study life drawing and costume design at Ringling, and she goes to Ringling in Sarasota and takes a course there. So
That's where Shelley was.
you've never heard of, but that's nothing. And so I think it's more complicated than he locked her away.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think, to his credit, Highland was about $8,000 to $10,000 a month in today's money.
Wow.
And then Scotty was in boarding school or at Vassar. And she knows, my favorite thing's an inflation calculator, but in today's money, the first of every month, he was between $18,000 and $25,000 out the door, caring for Zelda and Scotty before he bought himself a cup of coffee.
Wow.
And you could have said, hey, buddy, scale it back. When you talk about Fitzgerald had these money problems, I don't think it's because he was capricious or spendthrift in his life. Is he really kept them as comfortable as he could. And after his death, his estate was split evenly between Scotty and Zelda. And in today's money, they each got an annuity of about $50,000 a year in today's money. So, I mean, if you're going from 500,000 to 50, that's a jump. But let's be honest, I'd like to wake up and have $50,000 in the bank and do nothing.
Yeah.
So when we talk about they were in poverty, it's just not true, or it's skewed.
Yeah.
More, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Fitzgerald sacrificed a lot to keep Zelda and his daughter Scotty very comfortable, particularly at Highland Hospital. That's why he was forced into writing short stories. He made a ton of money selling those short stories. Many of them are quite wonderful, of course we know that, and they're great works of art. But he wanted to write novels, and the novels were not selling like the short stories, and it took him. I mean, he is somewhat bitter in his letters about this, that Zelda was keeping him from, and he talks about it openly. And you're writing your books, you're painting your paintings, and I'm here, I'm stuck in Hollywood, writing, treatments for movies, and then they're getting rejected on top of everything else. So you can sort of understand his point of view a little bit.
Yeah, when you read the transcript, in the transcript they're negotiating if they're going to stay married, and they strike this bargain that she will write no more novels, because she had written Save Me the Waltz, she had sent it to the publisher behind his back, he was furious. But in that room in the corner, there's a newspaper article, and I should go get it, and they're both smiling, he's standing behind her smiling, and it says, something like, I'm paraphrasing, but it puts her on his level. And in the transcript, they decided that she would write no more novels, but that he would get her short stories, an art show, and a play, all of which he does immediately. And he does the PR tour for her book. I mean, it was acrimony, but you can see they're in there smiling together. He gets her the play, plays 8 hours, he edits it down for her. I mean, it's called Scandalabra. He gets her the short stories. She's I don't know how to figure this out, but I'm like 90% sure she's the first woman to be published by Esquire, which is Show Mr. and Mrs. F to Room Number, where she catalogs all the hotels they had stayed in, because Scott co-signed her. And the reason we know this is that in one of those, gossip columns in the newspaper, they said, we know Esquire doesn't publish women, but we all know this is Zelda's. And so in the 30s, he gets her mainly 4 stories, and in some of the magazine, it's Scott and Zelda, because there's I think Campus Magazine, they didn't publish women yet. And then he gets her the Carrie Ross art show in New York, and he gets her in Time Magazine.
Yeah.
So where he can be pedantic and not so nice and talk about, you see them in this transcript, it's like, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? They're just pushing buttons.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow. And so part of me sympathizes for Scott, because even though I could tell everything bad about him, I do think he put her forward far more than men in that generation.
Yeah.
And she lacked, his complaint, I have to agree with him, she lacked the discipline to finish the editing. So, for example, in the early marriage, our own movie queen, she dashes the story off, which I think he was jealous. She just fast. Then he edited and wrote the twist ending, and then it was published under his name because he got $4,000 and she would have got $250.
Yeah.
And $4,000 in 1920-ish is equal $50,000.
And Zelda went along with that. It's not
Oh, yeah.
like she's
Yeah. So I mean, I'd go along with that today.
Wow.
So do y'all any other questions? Yeah. I think just she had one I cut her off. Okay. Go ahead.
So I have 2 different questions, but they're related. So one is, has there been study on, the identity development of Zelda? She started as a Southern woman, but she seems to be well traveled, for women of her era, going to different parts of the States, California and New York. So, and we all experience that over time, our identity shifts. So has there been, so my question is, even toward, let's say her old age, whether she's still associated as Deep South, Southern Belle, whether there has been studies on that. And another question is whether we have Zelda's family still living in Montgomery nowadays.
There are a few Sayers, but they asked for privacy, so we don't,
But they're here then.
Some of Zelda's niece, Sarah Noble Godwin, some of her grandchildren are still here. But they specifically
And some in-laws are here of the Sayers. They're very reluctant to speak.
Well, also because I think there's still the stigma of the mental health question. In terms of identity, I did a paper and a presentation, and I call it The Myth of the Southern Belle. If you do a word search, go to newspapers.com and put Southern Belle in, and click on all the Southern states from 1900 to 1920, there are 6 hits in North Carolina. No one's using that term in the South post-Civil War. But if you click on New York City, hundreds. There was a fetishization of the Southern Belle for the North. But in the South, the first example I saw in print of Zelda being called a Southern Belle is in the 1970s for the Mayfield book in one of the write-ups. The Southern Belle is a myth for that time period. Zelda was not a Southern Belle. Southern Bells were, didn't say anything. She was the opposite of Southern Belle. Technically, her mother was one. Well, Southern Belle is antebellum South. And after it, you weren't at the earlier talk, but none of the women here, they were trailblazers. They either didn't marry, divorce, which was unheard of. Mayfield divorces. Galway doesn't marry at all. Margaret Booth didn't marry at all. Zelda did. Interestingly, the happiest marriage was with Mencken, and he was the confirmed bachelor, but she dies tragically. And these women are trailblazers. There's none of that Southern Belle stuff. But the thing I don't know if you mentioned that I think is one of Mara's strong points is that everyone looks at Zelda when she's 20, but she's a woman. She grows, she matures. Yeah. She's do you want? And this is the thing I say about the Fitzgeralds.
That's why she has to be dressed in black. She's either this gorgeous Southern belle who's literally the belle of the ball, or she has to walk around in a black dress. I mean, there's no in between with her. I mean, this extraordinary woman is getting reduced to cliches, from the time she's 18 to the time she's 48.
But I also think with the Fitzgeralds, and they cultivated some of these myths in their lifetime, but do you really want to be known for your second year college partying? Because that's how they're remembered.
Yeah.
Woohoo! New York 1920, or that really bad Christmas or Thanksgiving that you're super drunk. I mean, that's kind of how, do you know what I mean? It's like one bad Christmas and you're drunk. Because the thing that killed Scott, some of you, they were chain smokers. It's the chain smoking. Scotty Fitzgerald, their daughter, she dies here, throat cancer, chain smoking. Her daughter, chain smoker, the meme of the house with the two bridges, that's the Fitzgerald's granddaughter, was head of the estate. She smoked, her husband didn't, he's passed. So they have two houses with a bridge, because they're in Vermont.
Yeah,
So
and Griselda would have, because she did have a worry about weight. And of course, as a dancer and trying to hopefully get hired, I suppose, by, she's gonna smoke.
But also in the 20s, there are ads, 4 out of 5 doctors prefer Camels. I mean, that's not a joke.
Wow, it's true.
Everyone smoked.
Yeah.
So, you know, it really is until the early 2000s that we kind of stopped.
I wondered if maybe there wasn't that aspect of the fact that there were the jazz babies of the golden age, you know, this whole famous, world famous, all that, and then that went away. And I wondered if maybe that had some effect on her as well, because there was some.
I'll tell you why I don't think so. Because in the transcript, and this, I really wish we could publish a transcript, but the family holds on to it. He's very angry about the way that she characterized, their novels were very autobiographical, semi-autobiographical, and he says, I made you a star, and you've made me whatever. And he goes,
And not entities.
and he goes, we were the most famous people in 1920, and her reply is, we were awfully good showmen. That's what she really said, awfully good showmen.
But I had seen a quote somewhere where she said, she was writing to him from the institution, and she said, there's no more hope.
Is this in Switzerland?
No, this was in North Carolina. There's no more hope.
I don't think I don't know, go ahead.
Okay,
There's one in Switzerland where she's very angry. And
this was like she was saying, we don't have hope, beauty, or fame anymore.
Yeah.
So I might as well be dead.
I think those are
So
the
that's why I was
Switzerland ones. And
thinking
because at first she's really angry as a girl, and then she becomes hopeless. And then she realized, I have to play the happy wife to get out of here. And she does, and that's when you see she's making paper dolls. Oh, darling, I love you. So if you read those letters, and there's a Switzerland letters, you mean she's like, come and get me. And then she tried to leave, and she's like, I'm leaving. And she walks out of there, and they put her in the Swiss sleeping cure for a week. They put her in a coma for a week or so. And then it was like, but also she was in agony because she literally had this full-bodied eczema, and they were treating her.
Yeah.
And then if you read those letters that way, I mean, this is my personal opinion, but when you realize the stages, because they put her in Switzerland through, it translates to English, a wife re-education program.
Yeah.
Wow. So she plays the game and gets out of there, and they come back and they're here at this house.
Wow. I think Zelda had regrets. I think where her regrets came in was not so much that she lost being, the jazz baby, but that she felt that some of the time that she had spent in the 20s was very badly spent. Too much drinking, too much smoking. She got involved with the Natalie Barney group, who were a group of women led by Natalie, but also by Oscar Wilde's niece, Dolly Wilde. And she did write, I'm getting involved with people who I don't think are right for me. So I think, the regret was not so much that, I'm no longer a hot chick, but more, I misspent a lot of my youth.
Yeah, I think she regretted not doing ballet. I think, because that's the question we have in terms of her as a ballerina. She clearly has talent. and she has fantastic teachers, but then she and Scott get married, she doesn't continue ballet, and then she does, but it's too late. It's not too late to become a dancer, it's too late to become a prima ballerina.
Right.
And we think she may have had as many as 4 offers, and why she didn't take them, we don't know.
Yeah.
But, so I think, because the myth was she wasn't a clothes horse, she wasn't that fashionable, she was more tomboyish, she was very more tomboyish. And I think Maire is correct, because when you see the amount of paintings that survive, and just her output and the amount of travel she does, which, I mean, no one's published on this, but when you just look at the sheer amount, I mean, she's taken that time back, and it's an incredibly productive time period, but you don't know anything about it. You know, just so I think she's trying to redeem that time.
Just forget the biographies up to a certain point.
That's right.
Yeah.
Do you think she destroyed her work?
No, I
paintings?
don't. Is that your question?
Well, I have a comment and a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
The first comment is when you were talking about marriage,
Yeah.
you know, that a lot of the women, you know, were not married, you know, it's surprisingly, well, the Dixie art colonists, the majority were women, and a surprising number of them never married, which I think is kind of
I'm sorry,
interesting.
were-
A surprising number of the women in the colony never married.
Well, part of that is from a historic point of view, because you have suffrage come in, but women actually lost, and to this day, depending on which state you're in, you lose rights when you become married. So I think it's still the same in
Right,
the
that's
state
very
of
true.
Alabama.
You couldn't have a career and.
No, well, the
Yeah.
other thing is because you became, under the law, property of your husband.
Right.
And anything, and so if you think Susan B. Anthony, she never married because you actually lost rights. So, and we all intuitively, you don't like, the father gives the wife in marriage, what is that about? It's a property transfer legally. Like, people are married and then you get a divorce, you find out what the law is. You're like, oh wow, I didn't know I signed up for this, let's be honest. But in certain states, I think that's why a lot of these women didn't. And in Alabama, I know because I'm an only child, had my family not left it directly to me, if I was married, my
Yeah.
property would have gone to my husband in this
Yeah.
state, under current state law.
Yeah.
So, so a lot of these women, like Mayfield, she had money. Had she married, that money would have gone to her husband. So I think that's an aspect for a lot of women we don't consider today.
So you don't think Zelda destroyed her artwork?
Okay, so what happened, it's a little complicated. When she died, there is tale that her sister was burning some things, and I forgot the lady's name, went and they're like, yeah, take this stuff. We know that there's a letter, because it's in MFA archives. Zelda actually wiped some of her canvases to give those canvases to WPA painters. Then there's the question of, did she sign certain things? And she would sign them when she went to give them to people. So for example, the Necrosi painting at the, this exhibit at the Montgomery County House, sorry. In the catalog, he tells the story that Zelda said she'll sign it when she came back from Highland and she never returned. So there's a question, she had I've heard from several people, she had this huge stack under her bed. And she also apparently had like the garage out back, and that there were certain things that she didn't want people to see.
Yeah.
I think there were a few things her family may not wanted to see, but I don't think her family was wholesale burning things. I think it's a
the reason
little
why I
more
asked is
nuanced.
that I was at the exhibit with Georgia O'Keeffe,
Mhm.
and there's an incinerator
Yeah,
in the back,
yeah.
and what she would do is if she didn't love it, she would burn them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh.
yeah, I mean,
So I think that's true of some artists. Do you keep your sketchbooks? Some people, yes. Do you keep your early drafts? Some people know, writers. So I think the reason you can be a Fitzgerald scholar is Scott kept everything. And, you can go through all his archive. They kept all their letters. The real tragedy is that Zelda's mother cleaned Zelda's room, and that's why we don't have Scott's letters to Zelda early. She threw them out. But Scott, we have all the Zeldas because he kept them all.
Oh.
Yeah.
I have great letters, I do read that.
Question I would ask is, are there details about the fire that you can share in Asheville that we do
Yeah.
not know?
Well, there's a lot of mystery around it still.
Steal a chair though.
It was started by a nurse who, and I found this newspapers.com, who had been a patient but had become a nurse.
What?
She started the fire. She has probably some kind of argument, potentially romantic, with the night guard, was angry. The claim was that the fire started, she ran for help. Some say she started the fire and that she didn't put it out and it went up the dumbwaiter. I think what I found, I think it's in like Mississippi or something, they got that lady out of town. And there was later an arson inquest and she was cleared. But they got her out of town and she made one of those like OJ statements. She goes, well, if I did it, they deserved it to the paper. You can, like in Mississippi. So there's still a lot of mystery. Even you go to Asheville, they're not quite sure. There was Zelda and 8 other women. Is it 9 or? So the other families all sued except for Scotty. Scotty, she was young, she did not sue, and they lost that suit. So there was that. Then there's the question of why she was locked in. Yeah. From what we understand, from what survives, because they've covered it up. That's the one. Is it Milford or Klein goes to South North Carolina? Those are the 2 big biographies. The Klein is a little bit of a dry read, but her research is really good. I may not agree with some of her conclusions because she's British, but she's really. But one of them goes. And there was this woman at the county office, just like, oh, I saved the file, and pulls it out and gives it to her. So that's the best that we have.
Yeah, that would have been Klein, I think. The thing about Milford is, how many times did you come down to Montgomery? Maybe twice?
Yeah, she crashed Zelda's high school reunion to try to meet her classmates.
I'm down here 7 years now, and I am still learning every single day. It is a different world down here. It's a wonderful world, don't get me wrong. But it's very different than growing up, as I did in New York City. She grew up in the Midwest and then became a teacher at Columbia. She's down here twice. She's making telephone calls to people rather than...
And also everyone that we've been able to interview that's still living hates her. She must have been very brusque or very... Well, she crashed... She writes about how she crashed Zelda's
high school reunion.
She gets on the bus and they're like, who's this lady? And then she writes about how they're like, oh, what should we, they close ranks and like, what should we tell this woman? And she like writes this and published it in like Women's Day or something. Yeah.
Well, I had an experience with her. She was giving a lecture on autobiography along with a fellow who had just written a book about Stalin, a biography of Stalin. So it's Zelda and Stalin. And she had started work on her second book, which was about Edna St. Vincent Millay. So she comes down to, it was Jan House, right next to where I lived on 74th Street. And I'm so excited. It's Nancy Milford, because I believed every single word she wrote about Zelda, and I was fascinated with Zelda. And instead of talking about the writing of biography, she decided to let loose about an incident that had occurred in a private school that her son had gone to. I don't want to get into the details of it, but it was somewhat unpleasant. And so we never heard anything about Zelda or Edna St. Vincent Millay. We heard about her something awful that had happened in her life, and she was nuts, you know. And I thought, wait a minute. And then the guy who was doing the book on Stalin got up, and he was fascinating and wonderful. I'm sure he was bewildered just as the audience was. So my experience with Nancy Milford was that, you know, she a bit of a head case, really.
No,
Good writer, though. Let's not.
That's the thing I think I heard you say is the thing is, without that biography, I always call it a novel, but without it, it's beautifully written. I mean, we probably wouldn't be sitting here because no one would care about Zelda. And if you think the influence that it did. We know the Eagles song "Witchy Woman" was inspired by the Milford Zelda biography. Bernie Taub, who is Elton John's writing partner, he had a copy. Janis Joplin loved that book. I'm trying to think of the other references from the 70s. I mean, she put Zelda on the map, so we in part owe her a great debt of gratitude.
Yeah.
But she shackles Zelda with
Yeah.
the schizophrenia and the dance.
I think we're coming to the end of that period.
Yeah.
Wow.
I-
We could talk a whole day.
So we're just wrap it up.